Hello and welcome everybody to AI for the Average Joe, season 4. Can you believe it? 2026, new year, new season. How exciting. Hayley, when we started AI for the Average Joe, did you ever think that we would get to season 4?
No, I didn't think we'd be doing this 3 years later. And actually, I'm a bit worried to go back and watch episode 1 of season 1 and see how much I've changed in that time as well. I was just thinking that. So I think I'll just stay in the moment if that's all right.
Yeah, absolutely. Where's that time gone, right?
Oh, I
Yeah.
know.
But we wanted somebody who could really kick off season 4 with an interesting perspective and looking at some of the amazing guests that we've previously had and some of the guests that we wanted to join us on the podcast show. Our guest today, Laura Overton, was an absolute no-brainer. So we're excited to have Laura with us today. Hello, Laura. How are you? Happy New Year.
I'm loving the new year already, loving the energy that you guys are bringing. And yeah, happy new year to you as well.
Thank you for joining us. And I know we just had a little bit of preamble before we hit record. 2026 is kind of I'm reading a lot on LinkedIn. I'm hearing kind of it's the year of change and things are going to be different and AI is going to do this and HR has to do this. And I guess Laura, I'm sure most people know who you are and what you do, but tell the watchers and the listeners, who are you? What do you do? And also, what are you hearing and feeling, particularly around AI and L&D through all the conversations that you're currently having? Please share with us kind of a bit of a summary for that to get us started.
Oh, well, it's really interesting when you say this is the year of. And I've been working in the field of learning and development for all of my career. So I can do this is the year of, this is the month of, this is the decade of, this is the century of.
Yeah, yeah.
I think we need to have focus at the beginning of the year. So I think having the year of something is really important. And
Mhm.
I guess my focus has always been throughout all of my career. And those of you who know me probably know me more for my research work over the last 20 years into high performing learning and development teams. But actually, every year of my career has been the year of how does learning really impact the lives and the work of organizations, of individuals, of teams, and how can we as people make a difference to the world of work? So, for me, this is a year of maybe our eyes being opened. I think last year was a heartbreaking year for many, many people. I think there was so much uncertainty, so much
Yeah.
change going on, but also a year last year of being realizing how resilient potentially we can be as our world is changing around us. And I'm not just talking about AI, I'm talking about the uncertainty that many people have been facing with their roles, with their jobs, with their organizations, with their customers, with the economic climate, with the just watching the news on a day by day basis, the things that we are having to cope with as people, as human beings. It's been piling on, I think, for most people. And I can understand why over the last few years it's been the year of well-being, it's been the year of resilience, because the year of transformation, which to be honest, many of us have been talking about for many, many years, is becoming a reality, and I don't think many are prepared for it. So for me, this year is, let's have a year of hope.
Nice.
A year of
Nice.
opportunity, a year
Yeah.
of experimentation, a year of curiosity. And I think particularly AI can fuel that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation this morning with you guys.
Yeah,
I love that,
absolutely,
Laura.
Laurie. Love the take, love the year of hope take. I think we all need a year of
Yeah,
hope, right?
please. And I think it's just finding what's in it for you, isn't it, when it comes to using these tools? I had a really good conversation yesterday with an HR leader actually, who was saying, I've been given AI. That's his responsibility
Given
now.
AI.
I've been given AI. And he was kind of like, which is fine. But whenever I've implemented a strategy or something new or a transformation or change, I've always been able to identify the end in mind at the start. And he said, this is the one project which I'm finding really difficult to identify the end because we don't know what that looks like. So I think it's a sort of transformation or change that feels very different to anything really experienced people in HR and L&D have dealt with before, maybe. And that's what's bringing some of this, well, where do I go with it? And we have to approach it differently.
You know, I love that observation there,
Mm.
because I think a lot of last year for me was spent bringing out the new book, thinking about a book. But
Feel free to plug
honestly,
your book, Laura, as well. Go
oh no,
ahead.
no, no. But you're just,
Please
I've
do.
been, I've been really honest about this. One of the challenges that I had when writing, and Erica, you know about this, is the fact that we've seen a lot in the data. We've seen a lot of what good practice looks like. And it's actually, let's get back to the principles of that good practice, the principles of why we're here in the first place. And to your colleagues' story, Hayley, you know, it's almost like we as professionals, I mean, I speak in the learning and development field, but to be honest, in any field at the moment, you know, to be thinking about why is it that we do our job rather than the how and the what. And that for me, I think is really vital in this new age where, you know, so much is coming at us that we don't necessarily know our ultimate destination, but our sense of who we are and what we're here to do. And for me, when I've really been thinking this through, it's not about performance and what is the goal of the business. And it is. Don't get me wrong, listeners and viewers, it is about that. But it's, you know, our function is to ensure that people are equipped and ready for that future, but we don't necessarily know how to be equipped and ready or what will be you know,
Yeah.
equipping them with. But starting with that why, that, you know, our role is to help people be equipped and ready, helps us to start to see, you know, maybe some of the approaches. And then our how is about what are the basic principles that we need to be thinking about. So when we get a new tool like AI, it's not about what can I do with it, but what are my core role? What's my core role? And how do I approach? What is my principles of approaching this role? You know, what are my overall objectives? What do I want to be known for? How do I want to be connecting and engaging? And then we could look at the tools in new light to say, okay, not only how can they help us do what we used to do, but smarter, better, faster, more creatively, but how can we do something new as well? So I think, you know, I feel very much for the person you were talking to yesterday. I've
Mm.
been given this tool, but yeah, what's my core purpose? And
Mm.
then that allows me to say, okay, well, what do I got around me in terms of tools and technologies that will help me fulfill that in a way that I never thought was possible last year? And that for me is why I think it's going to be the year of hope when we can start to think about our why and think about the opportunities for achieving our why that we didn't have last year.
Yeah. I
I
love
love that
that.
mindset. It is a mindset, isn't it? And
Yeah.
how we think about it rather than, oh, I need to be using AI tools to be able to keep up with what's going on around me, which as I'm delivering more and more workshops around this, is people's biggest fear is
Yeah,
keeping up. It
yeah,
came up yesterday in a workshop 8 times, you know, in a group of 10. And I think rather than focusing on keeping up, I think you're absolutely right. I love that take on go back to your why. What, you know, why do you do what you do and how can this help you? Then it takes away that need to feel like we're falling behind because actually we're utilizing it within our parameter. It's
yeah,
a really
yeah,
nice shift. I like that. Thanks, Laura.
Yeah. If I had a penny for every time I said AI is not causing the problem, but it's shining a light on it, I think this is another example of that. And Laura, I know you've done a lot of work in regards to this. But you know, knowing our why, knowing our values, knowing what we can add, how we're partnering with stakeholders, the impact that we're providing to organizations, how we're aligning ourselves to the strategy, etc. This isn't an AI thing, right? This is kind of you could swap AI out and put something else in, digital transformation or I don't know, acquisition or whatever it might be as an L&D function. This is kind of our core requirements. And yes, AI probably feels like the big shiny thing at the moment, but we could swap that out and swap something else in, right? So I think
yeah.
again, it goes back to that mindset piece.
Absolutely. And, over the last 20 years, I've always been interested in learning innovation, technology, and business results and how the whole lot come together. And there's been so many waves. I mean, I was even in my career working in learning when the internet came along. And e-learning was going to make email look like a rounding error. And trust me, the definition of e-learning back in the late 90s was completely different to the definition of what it has become today. So there's this kind of wave of the internet. There was a wave in 2006 of the smartphone coming through and the iPhone, and how mobile learning is going to change the world. Micro learning is going to change the world. Social learning is going to, and I tracked this consistently over a period of 15 years, each new tool coming in, out. And I was looking, I'll be honest with you, ladies, I was looking for that technology that correlated back to the business results being reported.
Uh-huh.
And not once in 15 years did I find a technology that correlated back.
Mm.
It was all about our application of that tool or technology to the way that we solve the problem of people
Mm.
changing their behavior so they could do new things.
Hmm.
And that, as you say,
Mm.
Erica, involves the ecosystem, it involves the environment, it involves the relationships, it involves us understanding that the place of work that we're in isn't isolated and in boxes. However much we would love that to happen, it is messy, interwoven, complex, and you pull on one thread and something else will ring elsewhere in the organization that you hadn't even imagined. And us learning to navigate that is what will allow us to harness not only this range of new tools and technologies, which are fundamentally changing our mindset, but also the new things that are going to be coming along as well. So I think that to me is what I'm really interested in,
Yeah.
is those principles in
Yeah.
that we can embrace as learning professionals that will allow us to become the learning professionals that we need to be in the future, as well as learn from the lessons that worked so well for us in the past.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. So say, Laura, you're speaking to a learning director in an organization or a head of L&D, and they ask you the question, what are the kind of things that I need to be really considering this year, either from a personal perspective in terms of my own mindset and capability, or how I engage with the organization when they come to me to say, like Hayley's example, you've been given AI. What would be your advice? What would you say to that person to say, right, number one, start with this, for example? Where would you go with that?
I wouldn't be able to say here's a process,
Yeah.
because the process will actually is cyclic. I think when we were looking, I was working with Michelle Ockers, who was my kind of sounding board, grounding board when it came down to looking at 20 years of data to think about the future. And we grappled with change that was going on around us as we were starting to explore this. But where we landed as a result of us grappling with all of her interviews, all of my data points to address that question, exactly that question, was a kind of a process of which we call try, which is that principles of practice that I would probably share with them. I say the first one, the T, is the tuning in. To what extent, on how are you tuning in to what's happening in your organization, what's happening with people in your organization, what's happening in the business, what's happening in the wider world, what's happening in our L&D industry outside of yourself. So tuning in is one thing I would say, how do we hone that ability to, instead of jumping in with an idea,
Yeah.
to stop and tune in to what is actually going on around, what can we potentially amplify in our organization? The R is about the way that we choose to respond. And so I would say to that person who's saying, oh, how do I make sense? Is, when you've been tuning in, the way you respond is important. Respond by being digitally curious, respond by being grounded in great learning science, respond by thinking of yourself as an enabler and an engager rather than a producer. So
Yeah.
your attitude and your mindset towards responding, I'd say, something to look at. How are you doing that at the moment? How might you do that in the future? And the I is about your continual improving. So tuning in, responding, improving continually.
Yeah.
So I think that they are the kind of core
Nice.
principles that I would say to a learning and development leader today. Let's do that in order to learn to navigate, and learn to surface the right priorities, and learn to understand what we need to let go of and what we need to lean into that we're already doing well, and have that continual improvement cycle. And the irony, and I'm quite happy to admit this amongst friends here, is that when
Well, you might have like wider friends after this, Laura. Just
I
a
Yeah.
caveat
know,
that.
but the thing that I personally struggled with the most is that I had millions of data points, and millions of different points of practice of
Yeah.
different things that good people are doing well. And yet to come up with something as simple as try, when particularly it's so familiar to us. Well, we know that if that's agile, that's all of these things,
Mhm.
but it's
Yeah.
come from our data. It's
Yeah.
come from
Nice.
L&D's experience, which means that it's stuff that works for us. We don't have to borrow a model from elsewhere or principles from elsewhere.
Yeah.
This is what works for us and helps drive better business results. So I would say that, those principles in terms of process are vital. But you know me, Erica, I also think that it's about how we think about our work as well.
Uh-huh.
And so we talk a lot about us as a profession, our thinking habits, and being bold.
Yeah.
Facing our orientation is our internal compass, business first, being open-minded, leading, learning, experimenting is the L, and D being intentional and deliberate. So, our bold mindset is going to be really vital as well. So they're the sorts of things and that person you're gonna be asking me to be advised. So we go, oh, well, where do I start? Start in your organization.
Mm.
Yeah.
Start in your team. Start with you.
Yes.
Think
That's where it
about
starts, isn't it?
think about
Yeah,
the
Absolutely.
yeah,
principles in your own life, in your own practice.
Yes.
Use
yeah.
those, to see where you need to adapt, share it with the
Mm.
team, explore with the organization, but don't look elsewhere for this. Start
Mm-hmm.
with you.
Yeah, that is just brilliant advice, Laura. And I love that try. I love that that makes, I think it takes it away. It brings it back to people first, doesn't it? It
Yeah,
brings it right back to just ground people into actually, this stuff.
yeah.
And I feel like people are just being so clouded by all the external messages and expectation on all the unknowns. And I feel that just grounds it right back to what feels like people can start to control the controllables again.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think
Mm.
just picking up on that point though, Hayley, because I've been doing a lot of reading around trends and predictions at the beginning of the year. I hate to do that. I hate to do trending. I hate to do predictions. But a lot of people are talking about the humanization of work in the AI world. And, a lot of last year's conferences were all about bringing the human back. And I think that's been addressing our fears. That's been
Mm.
talking about our fears of us losing our humanity in the context of AI. And yet, one of the things that gives me hope for the new year is not about how we lose control of how we connected with people in the past, but potentially how it can release new types of human connection, new levels of humanity in organizations. That for me is what is the exciting thing. It's not the hanging on to and
Yeah.
making sure we don't lose what we had in the past, but how can we release more human connection as a result of being in this new world, this new environment, these new pressures and these
Mm.
new opportunities that are around us. And for me, that's the thing that I personally would prefer to dig into, if that makes sense.
Mm, mm,
It totally makes sense, and it ties into your point about being bold, which I absolutely love. And I think, I know, and I've been there, a lot of L&Ds within particularly political functions, or there might be kind of in a HR function that, is quite difficult to navigate, or some tricky stakeholders, or could actually be quite challenging for people to say, right, now I'm going to go and be bold, or take a step towards. It might not be like a natural preference for somebody to be more confident or go and ask the question to the tricky stakeholder, or to, but actually I think in my experience, and certainly our experience with perhaps some of the more trickier clients that we've worked with, or certainly within corporate, the more bold and courageous you can be, the more kind of doors tend to open for you because you earn that respect. You show your credibility, especially if you've got some, early results to share, some test and learn, some transparent wins and things like that. So it's not just a case of going and being bold, but it's having a little toolkit to take with you, right? Maybe in regards to how you've, to your point earlier, used AI in your own life or your own role or your own function and sharing that with stakeholders. So
Yeah.
maybe 2026 is the year of hope, maybe the year of bold hope. Who,
Yeah.
just to put those together, that there's a bit of a tagline for us. But
Absolutely. But I think what's really interesting about that is that there's a difference between being brassy bold and being smart bold.
yeah,
Brassy bold is like, I've got to be more courageous, or I am a courageous person. I
Yeah.
can shoot from the hip. I'm going to go in. I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to ask the difficult questions. I'm going to get in their faces. There's that brassy bold. But the bold I think that we're talking about is that smart bold. It begins with us. When we talk about business first, am I curious? Genuinely curious inside of myself about what's really needed in the business. That kind of will come out in the way that we ask the questions. Am I open-minded to genuinely want to know what other people are doing to try and solve this problem that I want to support? Am I open-minded to being willing to say, actually, some of the things I've done in the past may have been wrong? So there's a courage there that starts
yeah,
from within. Am I willing personally to be leading and learning, as you say? Am I trying out some of these things and falling down and
yeah,
picking up and learning my lessons and being willing to share that even with myself, let alone my team or my stakeholders? Am I being really deliberate? Am I being conscious of that? What the risks are? Have I read up on the research? Do I understand the data as much as I can? So that's smart bold.
yeah,
As you
yeah,
say, it builds courage.
yeah,
It builds courage
Mm.
as we build those bold elements or become more aware of those bold orientations on our inner compass.
yeah,
So I think there's a difference between brassy bold and smart bold, and
yeah.
I'm definitely an advocate of smart bold.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of explanation of where we could go. And I've certainly done the brassy bold as well as the smart bold in my career, hands up. And it does get you two very different outcomes,
Mhm.
particularly
But
in
then,
the
but then
more
you
political
become you
environment.
become leading and learning. Then you go, okay, genuinely, but then it's great to be able to look back onto our experiences over the last 2, 3 years with AI, our personal experiences, and say,
Yeah,
okay, well, what have I learned?
yeah,
And
Mm.
how do I move forward? That's
Mm.
part of being smart bold.
Mm.
yeah, for
And
sure.
interestingly, just to your point, my biggest learns in the last few years have got nothing to do with what the tool can do. Actually, my biggest learns are very much in my own skill set and my own builds and the depth I'm adding in L&D and
Yeah,
all that additional stuff. So I think
yeah.
that's a really, really good point.
And
Are we
that's the journey
upskilling in
you've
the
been
right
through, Hayley, though,
place?
isn't it? We've been through that journey since
Yeah.
2022, and I think that's what we're talking about for people going through that journey and that introspection and that self-reflection. That's almost an enabler with this stuff, isn't it? I think that's what you're talking
Mm,
about.
mm. Brilliant. Really, really great conversation, Laura. Thank you. I've enjoyed that.
Yeah, fantastic. So, Laura, if as we start to wrap up, we've kind of talked about kind of what's the advice that you'd give a leader in this space. What, where can people start? That kind of principles first. That self, their introspection, self-reflection. How do I position myself and my stakeholders and organisation? It's not just about AI, it's about shining a light on our practice and our research and our data points and what else we could do. Just as we start to kind of wrap up, what would be your kind of practical tips for whoever's watching this episode today, listening today? What would you share either from a personal perspective or an experiential perspective or whatever it might be that kind of people take away to consider or implement within their practice effectively as soon as they can, really?
Well, I think one of the things that Michelle Ockers and I are really keen on, and Michelle particularly, because she's a great journaler, I'm not, is the idea of keeping a field notebook.
Okay.
And we suggest that in our Learning and Develop L&D Leader book.
Yeah.
Because it's about that keeping that reflection and the observations as you're seeing things, as you're noticing things. Because then, as we write things down, as we collect them, as we observe them, then I think that really helps us to understand ourselves a little bit more. Now, I am not a big journaler. I am absolutely not a big journaler. And, but I agree with this field notebook. But what I've noticed is that I have been using Claude on a daily basis
Yeah.
to reflect, to
Nice.
think through things through, to observe. And I've found that actually my use of Claude has also become a journal for me because
Hmm.
I can look back on what am I asking and how, to your point, Hayley, how has my thinking changed as a result of the way what I'm asking, how I'm digging in, where I'm exploring, what I'm curious about, the things that I'm grappling with in my work. And I grapple through by using AI in that space. So I would say, without becoming all introspective and like it's all about me, because our role is all about supporting and serving the wider community that we're in as learning professionals. But the more curious we can become, the smarter we can become, the bolder we can become, the
Yeah.
better we can serve our community in new and fresh ways and enabling them to be equipped and ready. So yeah, that field notebook. Whether it's using AI to support that, whether it's pen and paper, capture your observations, learn from your own experiences. That's experiential learning. And we need to also take our own medicine rather than talk about what we can do for everybody else.
Amen to that. Laura, thank you so much for sharing this wisdom, this experience, your insight. I think starting off with kind of 2026 being the year of hope and then having that kind of smart, bold approach. I think that, and then kind of finishing with that practical tip around that digital journaling, written journaling, kind of being curious. I think that's three great sections for people to go away and have a think about how they could work with that. So thank you so much for sharing that. Laura, if people have more questions, if they want to engage, if they want to buy your book, how do they get in touch? What's the process there?
Oh, well, I'm most active on LinkedIn. So
Yep.
please find me on LinkedIn, reach out and say hello. And also learningchangemakers.com is my home for really sharing thoughts and ideas. And you can get more information about the book and discounts on the book, the L&D leader at either LinkedIn or you can find me on learningchangemakers.com.
Amazing.
Brilliant. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching today's episode. I hope there's been a ton of inspiration that you've received off that conversation. Do let us know. Do give us some feedback and comments. I hope 2026 has started particularly well for you. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Average Joe. Thanks so much. Thank you, Laura.
Thanks.